If we really want to create change makers, we need to instill in them a love of learning.
And when you do what you love, work becomes play. And when you're playing and having fun, you're happy. And when you're happy, everybody around you is happy. And I will ask you to write your story, to write your journey and your experiences. You're very important. You have something very special to give the world. So I urge you to have confidence in yourself and do something to make a change in this world.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr Rana Dajani. حضورنا الكريم رحبوا معي بالدكتورة رنا دجاني.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to introduce myself by starting with a story. And the reason I start with a story is because I believe that in the past millennia, as we evolved as a species, there were actually two groups of people. There was a group of people who sat around the fire and told stories, and there was another group of people who frowned upon those who were telling stories and thought that they were wasting their time. But I think together we can imagine which group of people actually survived. It was the storytellers, because storytelling is so essential to our survival. We learn through stories. So in the spirit of evolution, I'm going to share a few stories. First, I'd like to introduce myself by saying that I wear 5 scarves. And the scarves actually are a symbol of the different roles I play in my life. So the first scarf that I wear is that I'm a mother. I have 4 children. And to me, that's the most important role that I can play as a human being, bringing up the next generation to be good citizens who can actually improve the world. The second scarf that I wear is that I'm a teacher. I'm an educator. I was a school teacher for 10 years, and then now as a university professor, I'm still an educator, learning and benefiting from the interaction with my students. Because the second job that we can actually contribute to society is by educating the next generation. Because our kids, if they're not spending time at home with the parents, they're spending it at school with the teacher. So my hat off to every teacher and every educator, because they are very, very important people in our community. My third scarf is that I'm a scientist. I'm a molecular cell biologist, and I do research in 2 fields. The first field is I study the impact of trauma on our bodies. First, we look at the impact of trauma on our brains and how we behave. And then I look at the physiology of the body as it responds to trauma. And we look at, for example, stress hormones like cortisol. And we look at it in your hair. You know that your hair grows every month 1 centimeter. And the hormone cortisol, which is an indicator of stress, deposits in the hair. So if I take a sample of your hair, I can know exactly how stressed you were as long as your hair is. And we also look at your DNA. What is the impact of trauma on your DNA? And we know that if you're exposed to trauma, your DNA changes how it's expressed, and that this can actually be transferred to the future generations. So we have to be careful to provide a very healthy environment for our children. The second field of science that I work on is studying the genetics of diseases such as diabetes in ethnic populations. And this is very important today because of personalized medicine and trying to understand how diseases develop so we can prevent them and provide better therapeutics in the future. Now, as a result of studying these 2 fields, I also work with stem cells. And because there's a controversy around using human embryonic stem cells, I had to be part and involved in developing a new stem cell law in Jordan that now is a role model for other Arab Muslim countries so that we can actually regulate how we do stem cell research and stem cell therapy so that we can advance in the future where science is taking us to have a better life and a better health. My fourth scarf is I'm a social entrepreneur. I started a program called We Love Reading, which encourages children to read for fun. Because as a community, unfortunately, all over the world, many children do not love to read because their parents don't read aloud to them. And the way to solve that is by asking parents to read aloud to their kids on a regular basis so that the children can, through reading, change their mindsets to be change makers. And this program started in Jordan, and it's now in 55 countries around the world and counting. Now, my fifth scarf my fifth scarf, usually I don't tell people what my fifth scarf is, and I ask them to read my book. So my book, 5 Scarves, Doing the Impossible, actually talks about the fifth scarf. But I'm going to cheat and tell you about it because you all came today, so I'll tell you what it is. So actually, a few years ago, in 2014, I was chosen as one of the most influential female scientists in the Islamic world. That's 1.6 billion people. Now, that's a huge responsibility. So I thanked the organization, and I was looking through the email. They had given each one of us a title. So there was the cardiologist, the mathematician, and I was scrolling down to see what they were going to give me. You see, I do all these things. And what I found out is that the title they had given me, you're not going to believe this. They said, I'm the Islamic feminist. And I said, no, you can't do that. Because when you say Islamic, whether we like it or not, all the Western part of the world is going to look at me skeptical. What is she about? What's her agenda? And when you say feminist, all the Eastern part of the world is going to look at me and tell me, what's her agenda? So I emailed them, I said, please, change it. I have so many other things. Name me some. And you know what? I don't want a title. But they insisted that what I write about, what I talk about, relates to this kind of title. And that's what led me on a journey or a pilgrimage of some sort to actually own that title, redefine it on my own terms. And that's why I wrote the book. So I'm going to share with you that journey of redefining what is success. And I approached this problem as a scientist because I'm a scientist, right? So I applied the scientific methodology, which actually comes from my Islamic philosophy as well. And what I did is, what a scientist is, it's seeing what everybody sees, but thinking what no one has thought. So I came upon the problem or the challenge around the world that we have less women in the workforce compared to men. And this is all over the world, not for any particular region more than the other, and for actually all disciplines. But as a scientist, I was going to look at it from a scientist in the sciences. And the first hypothesis that people put forward to explain why we have less females in the STEM field, because that's what I'm studying, as this graph from L'Oreal shows, that in school we have an equal distribution of males and females, but as we go into higher education, they show us that we have less and less females as we become more and more senior. Now, when I looked at that graph, I thought, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this graph. I teach in Jordan, and I've taught in many Arab universities, and actually we have over 50, even 60, even 70% of females in the STEM fields in undergraduate and higher education. So this graph does not represent the world, although it claims it does. And I want to draw that line. So that red line is the line of female, woman in STEM, at least in my experience in the Arab world and probably other places in the world like India. However, and that's why, for that hypothesis, that it's lack of educated females, that we don't have women in the workforce, is not the true hypothesis, because I proved, at least in the Arab world, that's not the reason. However, when we go to senior positions, yes, we do have a problem. There are not enough women in the workforce. However, this is across the world, not for any particular region. And actually, this research came out of Scientific American. There was an article talking about the paradox of countries who have a very low gender gap index, as many of the Arab worlds, paradoxically have high numbers of women in STEM. So I think we need to look at the implicit attitudes in different cultures and try to understand how that happens and question how these measurements, the gender gap index measurement is done, and call for more research to learn, because apparently we are doing something right in the Arab world in terms of STEM education for females that probably other parts of the world can learn from. Now, so I wanted to look for a second hypothesis to explain why we have less women in the workforce, since the education one doesn't hold up. Now, we know that we have the leaky pipe. As we get more senior, there are less and less women. And if we dig deeper to understand this, we see that it is actually married women who drop out and more married women who have children who drop out. So there's something to do with the family dynamics and children that is compromising the percentages of women in the workplace. And this led me to think that the framework of work, as we know it today, evolved in the past 200 years, was designed by men for men. And when women wanted to enter the workforce in the past century, what they did is they didn't say, wait a minute, stop, we are a little bit different They just try to fit into the mold. And when I say different, I only talk about two differences. And these are biological differences that have evolved over millions of years, where a female is different from a male. The female has a uterus and therefore can carry a child. A man can't. Although I've had people telling me, no, men will be able to carry a baby in the future. And I say, okay, when that happens, we'll discuss it. But for the time being, they can't. And the other biological difference is that women can nurse their babies, breastfeed them, and men can't. So just look at those two biological differences that have nothing to do with religion, social structure, or culture. These are biological differences. Women have not given themselves any credit for that. And what we were doing is we're trying to measure to one measure, which actually a man has designed and is still using to make us all measure us with the same stick. Can a fish climb a tree? No, but that doesn't decrease from the fish's capabilities. And this is very prominent when I see Facebook and Apple offering women to freeze their eggs till they're after 40. So denying me, again, my biological difference, that is very important, by the way, in bringing up the next generation. Now, to address this, we have a lot of things that have been introduced into the workplace. For example, nurseries, flexible time, leaving early because of breastfeeding. However, there are not enough of these put in place in the workplace. So, for example, at the UN in Vienna last year, one of the scientists actually brought her baby in, and she was going to nurse him because he was less than 1 year old. In the whole UN, which is the UN, meaning human rights, there was no place for her to nurse her baby, and the staff member told her you could do it in the bathroom. So this is an indication that we're not really acknowledging the important roles that we as a society should do taking care of the next generation. And we need to not just try to solve symptoms of what the problem is, we need to look at the root cause. And maybe we're asking the wrong question. You know, we assume we think we know what women want as a society. But did anybody stop and take a pause and think of shifting how we think about things and ask women themselves, what do they really want? You know, as a scientist, if you keep asking the same question and hitting a wall, that means you're asking the wrong question. And to me, the question should be not how do I get more women in the workplace? I need to ask women, what do they really want? And that means that they could want different things, not just that bare framework that men designed. You know, we want things that could be so diverse as the ceiling of this building. I don't know if anybody knows this building. This is a very famous building in Spain. I'll leave it to you to think. You know, I'm a teacher. You've got to do some homework, so you can check it out. But it's a very colorful, diverse ceiling as an indicator of the diversity of how we can design or define success ourselves as women. But how do we make sure that as we acknowledge our differences, that we are not discriminated against because of that difference? That's a very important question to put at the table. And most importantly, it's all about children. It's about bringing the next generation, whether I'm pregnant or nursing, or who's taking care of the children, whether it's a mother or a father, because both of them are important. Because research has shown that the first 5 years of a child's life are the most important years for their brain development and their social development. And the most important person in those 5 years are the parents. And these are like brain scans of children's brains, showing children who have been taken care of, and there's a social interaction, versus children who weren't. They were fed well, taken care of well, but no social interaction. Their brains are stunted. They don't develop properly, and so their mental capabilities, their social capabilities, their emotional capabilities are all compromised. So our role in bringing the next generation is very important, and we don't want to disregard that. The problem that I see is that these ideas of what is success, which is very male-dominant, male-designed, are spreading throughout the world. Again, without asking women what they really want. So a few years ago, an American sociologist actually told me that she went to Bulgaria when communism fell and was talking to the Bulgarian women, having this big plan of helping them get into the workplace, because that was the problem for women in the US in the 1950s. And when she told them, you know, I have this plan, I'm going to help you get to work and have the freedom to work, they told her, wait a minute, under communism, we were forced to work. We want to have the freedom to stay at home. So her perception of what is important was different from her culture to another culture. Another example, in the Arab region. I was in a certain country in the Arab region, and this guy said that he would only employ an Arab woman if she stayed till 12 midnight at work, because his perception of success, which is very male-centric, was that an American woman would stay till 12 midnight, but the Arab woman wanted to go home at 5 because she wanted to be with her kids. And why is it wrong to be with my kids? And why should the framework of success only be if I'm working till 12 at midnight? There could be other definitions of what success is. And actually, a few years ago, I was here in Dubai in 2008 in a big global women conference organized by Zayed University, and they had invited Jane Fonda, and I'm sure you all remember who Jane Fonda is. People are older, so they can remember. And she said something that really caught my attention. It was maybe her first encounter with women from the Arab world, and specifically Emirati women. And she said, you know what? These Emirati women, they have a kind of pride from the inside. They don't have an inferiority complex. You know, she was comparing, and I'm quoting her. She said that women in the West always want to compare to men. They want to be as good as a man, as if that's the standard. Again, back to that workplace. While an Emirati woman is proud of who she is as a woman, she doesn't have to compare to somebody else. She only compares to herself. And that is very true. And if you want to dig deeper to see where does that come from, so we can learn lessons from different cultures, not just north-south and west-east, but actually east-west and south-north. This comes from our rich history, our Islamic civilization, whoever lived in that civilization, whether they were Christian or Jews, where the first university in the world was actually founded by a woman, right? The University of Qarawaan. While in the 18th century, and this was way back in the 859, that's 859. While in the 1800s, in the UK, Britain, they were still discussing, does a woman have a soul or not? So what I want to do is actually, I told you about my first book, I'm actually writing a second book now, and this is trying to look at how women are perceived in different cultures, not just the Western culture. In Africa, how they are perceived, in the Arab world, in India, in China, in South America, the indigenous tribes over there, so that we have a buffet of how women can perceive success, how women are perceived themselves, and we can choose and pick what we want. And that will be such a beautiful kaleidoscope of diversity, which reflects our diversity as human beings. Now, how do you actually do this, right? This is really nice, it's all theory, but I also want to go home after this conference having something concrete to do. So it first starts by gender by design, creating rules, regulations, and policies that put gender central and front in everything we do. But it's not enough just to have policies and regulations, because if you have only old men who are interpreting these policies and regulations, they're going to interpret them according to what they think, right? So it's not enough to change the policies and regulations. We also need to make quota to make sure that there's enough women in the boards, on the committees, so that they have a voice and they interpret those laws and regulations in the right way. Also, even if you have diversity in that committee or that meeting or that board room, you have to be aware of the power dynamics and the unconscious biases that exist. So you have to empower those who are at the table to be equally perceived and equally communicate and equally participate. In order to do that, you actually need to change mindsets of how we perceive the world and how we perceive each other. And this is, by the way, not just about gender, women and men. It's about any minority, anybody who's different, that we need to respect them, let them be at the table, and have an equal power dynamic communication. And this may mean changing the rhetoric, right? Redefining success. And this is a whole spectrum, from maybe success is taking care of children, to success is I want to be a senior person at a company, and anything in between. And all of them should have a monetary value that a country calculates as parts of its GDP. And that's what's new and innovative. And we need to change how we also define leadership at the grassroots and at the most top levels as well. And by the way, this is all about lifelong learning. Today, with all the internet and digital communication, we're talking about learning throughout our lives, changing our careers within our lifetime multiple times. So this was a study done by MIT following graduates. And they found out that for men, which is the red line, it went up, and at age 40, it plateaued. While for women, it was a zigzag that kept going up even after 40. So we can change our mind. Even there's not just one definition of success within one lifetime. You can actually keep on changing. So to me, it's not about equality, as you can see. Neither is it about equity, not even liberation. Who said, I want to play baseball? I want to have the freedom to do whatever I want to do. That's the message that I want to convey. And as we are here today in Dubai, talking about the challenges of getting women into work and choosing their path of success, we need to not forget the women who don't have a choice, the refugee women, the ones who are forced to go to work in factories in poverty in different parts of the world. They are the majority, and those are the ones that we need to think about. And in order to help women in the world, we need to write our stories, showcase who we are. We need our young generation to read about people who look like us, who talk like us, who come from our own country. So I urge you all to write your stories. You are unique, and you have a unique experience and a unique story that you can give to the world. And you need mentoring. We need to help each other. We need to advise each other. So in Jordan, we created a mentoring program called 3 Circles of Alimat. And you know, Alimat is a word in Arabic that means female scientists, which speaks to our history. And it's about helping each other in a holistic way, personally and professionally. So how do we do this? We need to educate our young. Make them read. Reading is so important as a tool for lifelong learning, to learn critical skills and analytical skills. And we need to know who we are, maintain our identity, our pride in who we are, because that's the only way we can move forward. And be creative, be innovative, and foster those skills. And become entrepreneurs. You know, there's not enough jobs around the world, right? We have huge unemployment across the Arab region. So the way to do this is to create our own jobs. And because of the internet and the digital technology revolution, you can actually create your own job online without even moving to another country. And when you're actually designing your job, creating what you like, you become a happier person. And when you're a happier person, we know everybody around you is going to be happier. So if somebody tells you, and when you want to make a difference, and tell them what you think and what's your opinion, and you want to define your own career, your own success, and somebody tells you, who do you think you are? You're only a drop in the water. You can answer them and tell them, but what is the ocean? But millions of drops, right? And you are going to make a difference. It's the butterfly effect. When a butterfly flutters its wings in China, there's a hurricane in the Atlantic. In physics, that's called the chaos theory. And as a scientist, I have to always put some science into this. So you are the butterfly, making little changes in your own community that will have an impact in time and space that you won't ever realize. And in order to solve the 21st century challenges we are facing in energy, climate, health, and others, the only way we can go forward is by being interdisciplinary, creating teams, being collaborative, and have the courage to make a difference. I'm going to keep with you this video about women and how we can help each other.
The world needs us because we are scientists, teachers, artists. We are in all walks of life. We are also the daughters, the wives, the mothers, and above all, we are humans. Humans need to question and be questioned, to think, to share thoughts and emotions, to spread knowledge. We create networks to experience moments, a sense of togetherness and joy. 3 Circles of Alimat exists because humans are determined to make it into this world. So, shall we start?
So, you know, just like Yamanaka was a Japanese scientist. He grew up in a time similar to my time. When we were going to college, it was known that a cell from your skin would never be able to go back and become a stem cell. And if you suggested that it could change, you were either considered crazy or ignorant. But Yamanaka said, what if? Who said? And he discovered a way to turn your adult cell from your skin back to a stem cell, and got the Nobel Prize in 2012 for that effort. So I want to be like him and question the status quo and say, who said there's only one way to success? Right? Let's ask ourselves, what do we want, and pursue our passion and what we want. Thank you very much.